2:30, so I'll maybe give it like just a couple of seconds here in case anybody else would like to join the room. If you're on, oh, I don't need my mask as a presenter. Sorry, folks. Hi, Gabriella. Okay, so yes, I was just going to say that if you're online, maybe just type in the chat, hi, that you're there. Because the one unfortunate part about this particular platform is we can't see who is online or not online. So welcome to all of those who are online. Okay. And can you just confirm that you can see the slide deck okay on your side of things? Oh, perfect. Okay, so I'm going to get started. So my name is Michelle Brazas. I'm in Toronto at the Ontario Institute for Cancer Research. And I've been part of the Education Cozy for a long time, and it's actually one of my favorite groups and communities. So I'm thrilled to be here. I am going to give the Education Summit 2022 report on the activities that happened during the Education Summit. I didn't attend all of the working group sessions because you can't physically attend all the working group sessions. So I'm going to give a report on behalf of everybody at the summit. But if there's any specific questions, I may redirect those to the appropriate working group leaders. So let's get started. So what is a Bioinformatics Education Summit? Well, the summit is something that we started in Cape Town in 2019. And it's a way for bioinformatics trainers and educators to come together to drive the development of standards and guidelines for bioinformatics training and education globally. The most important part about this summit is it's not a conference, it's not a bunch of lectures, it's actually working group activities. So you have to come prepared to work and contribute in a hands-on way to the development of materials. The summit is followed up with monthly meetings to keep the momentum going and keep making progress on these activities. And in a really fantastic way, 35 different countries come together and 90 different people. So this is just a little snapshot of the working group that I happen to be in at the summit in 2022. These are randomly changing, so I'm going to keep up with my own timing. So what happened on day one? It was a 3-day summit, and it was hosted by AP Bionet in Indonesia in May 2022. And on the first day is a working group session that myself and Celia led on the Trainer Guidance and Resources Portal. So what is this portal? It is a collection of what I think are useful resources for bioinformatics trainers and teachers, and it's hosted on the Goblet website. It contains a series of questions that you as a trainer might ask and consider as you're developing a new training course or developing your own skills as a trainer. Each question has a drop-down menu containing useful documents, resources, links, etc. And we endeavor at the annual summit to update this portal annually to make sure that all the content stays current and relevant for the needs of our community of trainers. So what did we achieve as a working group in this particular session in 2022? Well, we reviewed all of the sections on the portal, updated broken links, deleted links that are actually really not relevant anymore. We added introductory text and explanatory text about what might a particular paper be about. In some cases where the content was becoming too long, we actually split it out into a couple different sections. I think actually one of the biggest contributions that we made over the May summit was adding new sections for training technologies or resources for training for public audiences and for clinical audiences. That content wasn't there before, but I know from my own experiences there's a a big demand for that. I'm just going to go back. Big demand for that. All of our edits and changes are going to be posted on the Goblet website, and the aim is to have them ready for the Goblet AGM in October. So one thing that we did conclude this session with was a discussion of new things that we could add to the training portal and new activities that we would do in 2023. Firstly, I think actually we talked about doing a survey. So we've never done a user survey of whether this portal and the resources with it and the organization of it actually functions the way we thought it would function, and whether it's useful. So we'll do that, hopefully also maybe at the Goblet AGM in October. We also talked about adding whole new sections for virtual training. Maybe for hybrid training. I'll come to that at the end of today's presentation. E-learning, sources of training materials for trainers in other languages, actually. So tying in some of the other working groups and other presentations that we've already heard about today. So thank you to my working group from this year's summit. It's a big team. Thanks to everyone. Another session held on day one was the ISCB competency framework, which Marta presented about earlier this morning. A recap of what Marta presented. What is the framework? It's a tool of for bioinformatics educators and trainers to use when developing courses and curricula so that their courses meet the needs of potential employers of their graduates. Conversely, it can be used by those graduates as they maybe want to plan out their career path and what competencies they might need to gain a career position that they're looking to gain. The current competency framework, which is version 3, contains many career personas, as Marta presented, but it doesn't encompass career progression roles, which is what Marta was talking about. So it doesn't go from a beginner, intermediate, and advanced. It just has a list of competencies and doesn't take into consideration how those competencies increase to a different level or change as you advance through your career. So the working group this year extended those competencies for the core facility scientist to include those different career stages. And they agreed on a roadmap on how to broaden the framework to encompass other bioinformatics roles and career stages. So what did they achieve? They agreed on a progression plan for the core facility scientist. They also discussed how the competency for that scientist role would change with different levels. They discussed the competencies that are not included in the ISCB competency framework and what would be required to sort of supplement the existing ISCB competencies for that core facility scientist role. Of course, follow-up meetings, you don't do this into completeness in a single session, so they're going to continue following up with that with presumably monthly or regular meetings with the group. So again, not done in isolation, and a thank you goes out to the more than 20 people. And I'm just giving the URL that Marta gave earlier to the particular ISCB competency. Day 2, what happened on day 2? Back to Ben's presentation, training in low to middle income countries. This working group had previously worked on collecting several useful ideas and challenges upon which to collect and/or develop materials. Those included language barriers for training in LMICs, EDI in bioinformatics training in LMICs, and infrastructure challenges within providing educational content in LMICs. So this year, the focus of the summit and the working group was to complete a draft of the best practices for providing training in LMICs, to work on how to decentralize, or I think decentralize is not an awesome word, but it's to grow the trainer and training community in an LMIC location. That's what they mean by decentralize, and to discuss how to build and maintain a common bioinformatics education infrastructure. What did they achieve? With respect to the best practices document, they recruited a volunteer to template out things in GitHub. They talked about adding a governance layer to the best practices thing document so that contributors of material would know what is going to be accepted and or moderated, so that you're adding appropriate material. They also discussed the common shared infrastructure framework, and really discussed the needs that you kind of need to have sysadmin skills and other minimal toolbox of skills in order to support this kind of infrastructure. And then they sort of migrated towards discussing the cost of cloud structures and how difficult it is to actually figure out what the cost is for using that infrastructure. And so that led to a really broad discussion on infrastructure for LMICs. As Ben pointed out this morning, this is a large working group that regularly gets together. And so thank you to everybody. Moving on to day 3. This began with a virtual to hybrid model discussion. This was a new working group that hasn't been used at the Education Summit previously, but it's quite timely, obviously, as the pandemic evolves. Switching from in-person to virtual, that was quick. Now we sort of have a taste of both worlds, and hybrid seems to be the mechanism that most people are gravitating towards, because you want to encompass the best of both worlds. The advantages gained by virtual platforms of low cost and higher attendance, as well as the networking and the social activities of the in-person. So how do we do that? So this was working group. We're experiencing it right now. So together as a working group, these were some of their aims: to discuss what is great about virtual events and what is great about in-person events, at least get that down, and then discuss the aspects of training that you could offer virtually and which aspects of training you could offer in person. So trying to figure out how to navigate the logistics of planning a hybrid event. And then try and put together a collection of hybrid event examples. So during this working group, participants discussed the challenges of the hybrid model and mapped out potential solutions. They discussed experiences from hybrid events, both as an attendee and as an organizer. And they discussed lessons learned from virtual training that can be translated over and copied in the hybrid event model. So those were the discussion themes that they worked on, and I'm going to build upon that, I think, at the end of the session here. But what did they achieve in 2022? They identified some top challenges in offering hybrid events, particularly cost. And being on the board at ISCB, I know that that's a big problem. They talked about engaging remote learners, human resources needed to offer hybrid events or higher time zone considerations, so you bump up against that a lot, and power challenges in some reason. They also collected experiences on hybrid events and built the start of a collection of resources for future reference. They identified aspects of virtual training that will continue in hybrid training. And again, the emphasis is on inclusivity, particularly in LMICs, and how virtual platforms make it much easier to record and distribute and share our content online. So I think that's an important learning point. And day 3 concluded with Train the Trainer. What do we mean by Train the Trainer activities? This is a course to develop the skills needed as a trainer to design and deliver training. So to build our community of trainers. And the goal in this particular Train the Trainer session was actually to build a virtual version of the Train the Trainer course. Can we put a generic course together, outline it, the design and development of a virtual course, map existing in-person or existing content onto the course outline, and identify gaps that still need things for development, and then figure out how to operationalize such a virtual course. Coming up on the next slide, they actually set quite an aggressive timeline for November 2022 as the first offering. But this working group, they got a lot done, clearly, in a very short period of time. The course is going to be titled Course Design and Delivery for Bioinformatics Trainers. They identified an audience. They set out the learning objectives. And as I said, we're quite aggressive about the timeline of being able to offer this course in November of 2022. Other things that they worked on and achieved in the working group this year was mapping out a format and schedule. So they had a lengthy discussion, I presume, on the format and the schedule landing on, and they landed on a virtual blended, is my understanding of the model. I'm going to go back one slide. With live virtual sessions hosted twice a week to address questions and answer, have a discussion around those questions from watching pre-recorded videos and completing online materials. So it definitely sort of a asynchronous hybrid model. They landed on, for at least the first offering, a single time zone offered in English as a way to iron out any problems, and then presumably future iterations would expand beyond that. And then they collected a list of facilitators with whom to advertise the course. There was some discussion about the application and selection process and how audience members would apply to the course. And what, you know, when you think about hybrid like this, you have to consider that you'll never see that person's laptop environment. So you have to understand what your students' infrastructure is without ever seeing them. So that was, I think, a useful consideration in the application process. And then I think finally, because they are going to be doing this in November, they did the mapping exercise, identifying content that they didn't already have, and will spend between now and then filling in that content and then offering the course online in November 2022. So stay tuned for that. So again, a shout out to the whole working group that achieved this. And that brings me to the end of the whirlwind tour of what the Education Summit working groups did in 2022. It's a great group, a fantastic, fun 3 days, mostly because you really work and interact and engage with each other. So I would encourage you, if you would like to join the Education Summit and participate in the future, email at info@mygoblet.org and you'll just be added to the mailing list when the next Education Summit comes around. I'm going to open the floor to questions, and I'm going to also leave it that I think this is an hour session that I would like to do two things. One, I would like to identify any working group activities that need to maybe be set up or considered for the next Education Summit that we maybe don't touch upon yet. And then B, I actually really, mostly because I'm just getting back to the office and I'm going to be running hybrid events a lot more frequently. I really want to gain everybody's experiences. And your experiences are acute right now because you're in a hybrid event. So we have people online, we have people in person, and I think gaining the perspective from both of the audience would be really useful. So I do have set up a Google document. It's a single Google document. So Kevin is going to help me momentarily split the group into a breakout room. So everybody online will be shoved into a breakout room. And if you could go to this tiny URL, which will open up a Google document, and you can go to the online audience section of that document and populate your experiences as online audience members in a hybrid event. I will spend maybe I would say half an hour. So we'll go to, maybe we'll go to 25 minutes. We'll go at quarter after the hour. And I almost said 3, but I remember there's time zones to consider. So quarter after the hour, and then we'll do a report back. So I'll ask the online group to have at least one presenter report back. And obviously somebody in the room will report back as well. So we don't have, we have, I don't know, 15 people in the room here. So I think we can formulate a single group. And I am, oh, how do you know that? Wow, that's fantastic. Thank you, Kevin. Master guide knows that there's 15 people online, so that's great.
If you scroll down, there are 15 participants.
Okay. So I don't need to, for the people online, can you just confirm that at least one individual has the Google document open? Or I need to put the slide back up with the URL. Okay, somebody has it, so that's great. Thank you, Kath. Okay, so Kevin, we are going to navigate breakout room, please.
So everyone going to the same
Everybody
breakout?
goes to one room. So okay. Moderate and then room capacity, that should handle everybody.
Let's go for 30. But
sure. So we have one breakout room that I can see the system is working hard to create. So hopefully everybody online will end up in one room. Oh, it's created. That's fantastic. And we're hitting continue. So you should be dumped into the breakout room. And it's set for 30 minutes, but I'll retrieve you at 15 after. Okay, team in the room. Sure. Hang on a second, Kevin. I'm just going to mute the room.
Correct.
So that Okay, hopefully I pulled back the online audience back into the main room. Can somebody just message in the chat? That would be great. Oh, brilliant. Thank you, Kath. And so I did a little bit of work in the background, and Benjamin, because you were a speaker in the morning, you were really easy to add as a I'm sorry. Sorry, Gabri. I didn't mean to cut off your messaging there. So Benjamin, I do see you as a speaker, so that's great. So I'm going to turn the podium over to Benjamin to give a report back from a lessons learned perspective from an online audience in hybrid mode, and then we'll turn it over into the room to get a perspective of the in-person audience and a lessons learned summary. So I'm going to mute myself, and I think that's it for you.
Yep. Perfect. Thanks. Thanks, Michelle. I think hopefully everyone can hear me. So for everyone that was in the virtual breakout room, then please do add stuff in the comments if I forget something or if I omit what we were talking about. So we started off by talking about the Juno platform itself and how we found that. I found it quite useful. I found it quite relatively easy to use, but I think some other people found it quite tricky in terms of being able to navigate to the right place and to click on the right links and those sorts of things. But I guess, I think not many people have used this Juno platform before, so I guess it's a teething problem in a way. The next thing we talked about is time zones, obviously, but we think that that's always going to be a problem. I'm based here in the UK, so we were sort of talking about how the majority of workshops and conferences that at least I've attended have been quite favorable in terms of being in sort of like the European Africa time zone. When we go to the education summit, I know that people call in from the West Coast and from Australia, and it's the middle of the night or really early morning for them. So I don't know how. I don't think we didn't proffer a solution to the time zones because the world is round. We like the catch-up functionality. That was really useful. But what we found, one of the downsides of that is that we think that the way that the pre-recordings have been required, it means that it sort of created double the work for all of the presenters in terms of having to make the slides even further in advance, have the pre-recording done and edited and uploaded sort of a week in advance. So that was sort of a downside perhaps of our experience as virtual trainers. Some of the other common things that we found, I think have been discussed before in terms of virtual training. So distractions during the virtual attendance means that you're not really able to fully protect the time, and you find yourself getting looking at emails or getting distracted by other things. Whereas when you're in the room in person in the conference, you can fully immerse yourselves. One of the things as well that we found is that the lack of networking is something that we really find troublesome, and we really miss it. So I think one of the things is we're particularly talking about this in terms of young scientists and young PhD students, for example, who might not have already built a network before the pandemic or when in-person conferences were the most common format. So we obviously have built up a big network over many years, and we know people from different things and walks of life. But for new scientists who are just starting out, they might never have attended an in-person conference or have the confidence to go and just email or message someone on the Juno platform. So we tried to think about ways that we could foster younger people to be part of the conversation and sort of get them sort of active in the communities. One of the things that we talked about was a benefit of virtual training and virtual conferences, is that it means that people who wouldn't have been able to attend can attend. So we had James saying that he was about to attend in person, but there was a strike of Scandinavian Airlines, so he was able to attend virtually. I was able to go to my son's birthday on the weekend and then still attend virtually without having to miss that. So it's being able to give people their cake and allowing them to eat it as well. So it's the best of both worlds. Sorry, I'm just going through a bit more of our notes. And then, yeah, again, I think something that we've thinking about with virtual workshops as well, and also virtual meetings, is that basically all the effort, lots of effort needs to be proffered to make sure that the people who are attending virtually are still like included in the conversation. And I mean, I think that we felt part of the conversation in this particular ISMB and this COSI, for example, but generally it's something that the people who are in person need to really keep at the forefront of their mind to make sure that people who are attending virtually are included and they're getting the same experience, or as close to an in-person experience as we can really do. I think that's a summary of what we did. I mean, I've spoken for over 5 minutes now, so I'll be quiet. But I think that was everything. I don't know if there's anything that people wanted to mention in the comments as well.
Yeah, if anyone else in the online group has anything to add, feel free to put it in the comments. I think if I had to add another aspect, it's the ability to allow the online audience to actually speak and turn their camera on. I think it's certainly one of the reasons I moved away from webinar Zoom and just stuck with meeting Zoom, because you bring in that personal experience, and I'm suffering from, only being able to have Benjamin as a surrogate of the whole online group, because he was set up in the system already, and I just can't switch to any of you other online. So that to me is a very big challenge. Does anybody from in the room want to present on some of our lessons learned rather than me just talking through everything? I did scribe it out. Anybody? I'm happy to give a summary of the room, but I want to share the floor. Don't be shy. Right. Please, anybody.
So in the room, the first thing we actually started with was actually talking about some of the technology issues again, and sort of some of the issues here, but also just thinking about setups in rooms. So if we was to talk about kind of different things, we've seen, different issues with audio setup, how easy or difficult it is to actually use the tech. And this is from, presenter moderator's point of view, but even then, in terms of interacting with the online setup if you're live in person in the room. And actually, that's one of the things we said. Of course, even here, we've got this app here. Most of us in the room are not, logged into the app and things, or logged in as you are watching it. And maybe we're not going to interact in quite the same way because we don't need to, in some respects, because we're not having to use that to fully participate in the conference. That's maybe something on our behalf we need to look at anyway. We talked a lot again about the differences in the experience and the differences that we see sat here as well in terms of kind of watching the remote presenters over watching live presenters, and talked that moved that on a little bit to training as well, and the fact that it's hard to make the experiences equitable, and actually should we be trying to when actually it's not possible to make it equitable. But then part of it is also in terms of maybe training events, also making it clear what the expectations or experiences will be of people if they're remote versus if they're in person. And actually, if we're telling them that in advance and they're choosing to go either way, maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe that's fine. We also talked a lot then about sort of building those connections. Obviously, some of the issues when you're remote again is being able to build that connection. And we had the experience here of somebody who did some face-to-face work first, and then went remote, and that remote bit was much more successful because you'd had that bit of face-to-face first, you built the connection. So then the last few bits we were discussing was really that, how do you build those connections? So if you are just remote, how do you get that connection being built? And can't we find ways to sort of build those? And the one comment actually Russ said about not being too negative with this as well. There have been a lot of positives from this as well, so we do have to think about the positives. Anything else from the room that I missed? No? Okay, so that was our summary. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you to both the online group and the in-person group. For me, this attending in person and having to lead sessions and participate in sessions, thank you, Benjamin, has been really, really helpful in terms of understanding what I need to think about going forward as I have to build and operate hybrid events. I am going to circle back to two things. My initial question for Education Summit: are we missing any working group that we think that we should add to? Yes, Sarah. Green. You see, Sarah raised her hand and said green, and I see online having proper camera, proper audio. Okay, so yes, we'll add that to the document. Thank you very much, Matus. But are there any other working group activities that maybe need to have momentum build up in them, which is what the Education Summit does, is carry forward momentum? Yes, Russell.
Well, I can say we did a 10-day working group on a degree program and endorsement and course affiliation, and it basically didn't succeed. We didn't get
I think you have to speak at the microphone.
I was just saying we did attempt another working group at the summit on a degree program endorsement and short course affiliation. So basically trying to bring our standards to actually identifying what we can say is a well-designed and well planned and a certifiable program. And it fizzled out at the meeting. Basically, we didn't have a critical mass to run the session. So
I was wondering why I didn't get to report on your session. Okay, thank you. Yeah, okay. Feel free to message me later on if you think of a working group that might need to be added to the Education Summit. And I see that there's additional comments that keep coming in on the chat about lessons learned from hybrid events. So that's really great. Kevin, I have a question for my in-room tech support here. Do we save the chats from these sessions anywhere?
I do not know.
Okay, so I will make sure that that we go in, and James, if you haven't already, maybe add your comment to the document.
We can download the
okay, just because I don't want to lose people's comments. They're quite useful, and I'd like to build that into the document, so that'd be great. And then I didn't really open the floor to any questions for myself on my presentation because I really only could answer on a single working group that I led. But are there any questions on the Education Summit or what we did this year in May 2022? Okay. That was great. Good deflecting. I'm putting that at the end. When is the next Education Summit is coming in? I believe it's in a year's time, Gabri. So it'll be in May 2023. And thank you. Oh, yep. Go ahead.
My question is, when is the next Goblet AGM? You said October, and I couldn't find any information on the Goblet.
Yeah, I haven't seen any information circulate yet about the next Goblet AGM meeting. It usually happens in the October-November timeframe. So definitely, if you would like to participate in that, again, email info@mygoblet.org to make sure that you're on the list for when that gets announced and set up.